Hey, Lord of the Rings fans, welcome back to part two in my series. We're going to be looking at the two towers and things that bothered me about the Peter Jackson extended versions. Not the theatrical release, because the extended versions are much better. Now, don't get me wrong, these movies were awesome. The whole trilogy was great. I waited so many years since the Ralph Bakshi version for a Lord of the Rings movie to come out. And I'm so glad that Peter Jackson was able to pull it off. He did an amazing job. But these were just like little things that bothered me. I know I'm nitpicking on a few of them, but because I've read the book so many times, I know this like the back of my hand. So let's get on with it. So the first thing that kind of bothered me was the scene where you see the Fords of Eisen and the death of and the mortal wounding or death of Prince Theodred, King Theoden's son. Now this scene you look at it and it looks like he fell in an ambush. See the scene here. There's the little islet. And then Almer comes in. Now I know Almer needs more screen time, and that's why he's here. But the reality is there was a huge battle at the Fords of Eisen. In fact, there were two battles. In the first battle, Prince Theodred led some riders over to try and overthrow the forces of Isengard before they could get set in motion. But the Isengard army, the army of the Isengard was ready, and they brought him to bay out in the plains, and he was forced to retreat to the Fords of Eisen. Now, the Fords of Eisen on the west bank, there were forts, earthen forts, defending the fords, and the fords sloped downwards. There were no trees on it. It's plain. It's a plain. It's pretty treeless there. So the fact that they ignored geography, it makes it look like it's up in the up near Fangorn Forest. So they really ignored geography there and the fact that there was a huge battle. Two of them, in fact. The first one, the main goal of the army of Isengard was the death of Theodred. And once they achieved that, they broke off the attack instead of committing more forces. And when they did finally commit their whole army in the second battle, things went bad for Rohan, and they were forced out of the fords. But their army was not destroyed there. The army of the Westfold and some troops from the capital district of Edoras that Elfhelm had brought with him. So there was two huge battles, and it would have been nice if Peter Jackson had gone back as a flashback scene and showed that. Because it wasn't Eomer that found Theodred, it was Grimbold and Elfhelm who found Theodred. Yeah, it looks like an ambush. You don't see a lot of dead Urux or Urukai. Hey, there's one of the dwarves from The Hobbit. So there he is. Poor guy, his screen time is done. Then they ride off with him. That scene really bothered me. Now the next thing that kind of bothered me was the banishment of Aomer. Now Aomer wasn't banished, he was in fact imprisoned when he returned to Edoras after leading his Arid of 120 when he led his Arid of mounted men against the Urukai that waylaid the Company of the Ring. Omar followed their trail and slaughtered them at the eaves of the Fangorn Forest. When he returns back to Edoras empty-handed, his imprisonment because he left the capital undefended since Theodred took all the available manpower at the time, all the professional men, out west. And then, of course, Theodred comes back all dead, which doesn't help. So the banishment of Aomer was not something that... Because then Aomer just rides off into the... In fact, he becomes the main commander on the Westfold that Gandalf goes looking for, instead of Erkenbrand, who is the Marshal of the Westfold. Aomer was the Marshal of the Eastfold. So they're playing with geography. The concept of geography in Peter Jackson's universe doesn't really match the reality. Okay, moving along. So next, the whole warg attack bothered me. Now there are wargs and wolves of Isengard that do slink around the battlefields and attack horses. They're mostly wolves, not wargs. I think there's only one warg that crosses the west. That's maybe Saruman's. But they're mostly wolf riders, so really big wolves ridden by small orcs. It's a specialized thing that Saruman has adopted from the Misty Mountain orcs. And of course they get attacked. The column from Idris gets attacked. This doesn't happen in the book. And the whole time they hear wolves howling from afar, but they don't really see any wolf riders or wargs. So the whole attack, when it boils down to it, and there's a lot of them. It's a big company of wargs attacking. And they're coming at them with swords and bows and whatever. So as part of a battle, it's pretty cool. But then of course Aragorn gets caught and gets caught in the stirrups of one of the wargs, and then he falls over a cliff with this other one. Now this doesn't happen in the book. I hated that scene. So I thought this whole scene was dumb as hell. It was pointless. I don't know why they added it. They just added it for tension. And then of course Aragorn gets on his horse, on a horse he happens to find, and they move ahead of the army of Isengard towards Helms Deep. So Aragorn appears at the last minute. To me, this was one scene that could have been left out. As cool as the warg design was, it was a dumb thing to do. So this scene was very hard to find. It's not the exact scene I want. I wanted the Exodus from Edoras, where you see all the people from Edoras leaving and heading for Helm's Deep. I can't find that exact scene, but that's the only thing I could find on YouTube for some reason, where everyone's fleeing to Helm's Deep. And there you see it. In reality, what happened was Theoden took about 1,000 mounted men westward to Helm's Deep, to the Fords of Eisen. And Eowyn was supposed to gather all the townspeople and people in the countryside and go to Dunharrow. Because why would you bring your people closer to the war zone? You would lead them away from the war zone. And then gather all the people from the East Fold and do a weapons take up at Dunharrow, because there's more shelter up in Dunharrow. It's also harder to get up there. So it was a really dumb idea by Peter Jackson. He wanted to show how civilians impact, give you a reason to fight for. Well, in Helm's Deep, the people of the Westfold are already sheltering there. Erkenbrand had already well provisioned it for the people that are in the glittering caves. And now she's just bringing more in from Edoras, which is a sizable community, especially you're talking about all the people in Rohan. Rohan's a pretty big country. The population density is kind of like on par with, say, Saskatchewan in Canada, maybe. It's a big country with not a lot of, only so many people per square kilometer. Unlike Gondor, who would be more like, say, Ontario, from the Canadian perspective. So her bringing all these people into this place would just make it more cramped. Erkenbrand had already left a garrison of 1,000 men on foot. Most of them had seen too many winters or too few winters. Many of them, they were too young or too old. But he had left it as well defended as he could, while he went and took what was most of the men to the Fords of Eisen to see what was going on, and he was cut off because he was gathering Grimbold and Elfhelm's commands when they'd been chased away from the forts. So again, this is Peter Jackson just playing with things like Tolkien understood war very well. He had been in the First World War, and all the civilians were evacuated well away from the front lines. Paris was overrun with refugees from the northwestern France, and you don't bring civilians to the front line. So it's kind of boggled my mind. It's an impressive scene. Gotta give it that. That's the other thing I didn't really care for, was Arwen's fate. Elrond tells Arwen it's time to head to the Havens. No, it's not. Elrond does not leave until... He doesn't have to leave until the rings are destroyed. That's the problem with the Rings of Power. Once the rings are shorn of their power, then he will know no peace or joy in Middle-earth. And the idea is that when he goes, his children have to go with him. Now, I don't know how that works for Elladan and Elrohir, because they stay behind. Arwen chooses a mortal life, but only when she finally gets married. At this point, she can go across the Havens, but she's not going to go until... If Aragorn died in battle, then she would probably go over. But as long as Aragorn is still alive, so this is like adding tension to the movie and also giving Arwen screen time. Because Elrond and Arwen have no screen time after Fellowship of the Ring until the very end in the Return of the King during the wedding scene. So this is to keep them relevant through all three movies. Because they really do have very little time in the Fellowship of the Ring. Arwen's in one scene, Elrond's in like 2 or 3 chapters. Just like The Hobbit, he's only in one chapter there and then one chapter at the end, kind of. And then the same here. They're just secondary characters, but now because they made Arwen into a bigger role than she's supposed to have. I could have went back to Fellowship and said Arwen taking over for Glorfindel and helping save Frodo. But I didn't. Because that was okay. You need a role for Arwen. Arwen doesn't have enough to do. So I wasn't too, impressed with them going back and forth to Arwen's fate and how she finds out that there's she has visions of a child with Aragorn. No. Elrond was perfectly fine with Aragorn and Arwen being together, but knew that it would only happen if the One Ring was destroyed and the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor are reunited under Aragorn, the crown and the scepter. So I wasn't too thrilled with this. I understand why they put it in. Now this next scene really bugged the hell out of me too. It's when the elves arrive at Helms Deep to help out. I thought it was totally unnecessary. Like, these guys were... Lothlorien was getting assailed by Dol Guldur. Like 3 times the forces of... Sauron's forces at Dol Guldur attacked Lothlorien. Lothlorien didn't have the power to send this many elves to help out. There were already roughly 1,000 men holding Helm's Deep at the time. Though some had seen too few winters or too many winters. And then King Theoden brought another 1,000 horsemen with him. So, but it gives the idea that this is the United Nations and that there's no such thing as racism in that. But the elves were fighting. This would have been better if Peter Jackson had shown a cutaway scene real quick of the assaults on Lothlorien in the extended versions instead of having elves. Didn't need the elves. So I was not a fan of the elves showing up in Helm's Deep. And Haldir giving him a bigger role than he has. He's only just a watcher on the northwestern borders of Lothlorien. He only keeps a lookout out there. He's not exactly a leading guy, but they made him into one. All right, so now we get into the Entmoot decides. So the Ents take like 3 days to discuss what they're doing. And Merry and Pippin are like, Merry's all getting upset with him. When in reality, he didn't. In the book, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't make a decision. Just by being there, their message. But the Ents, they say no. They don't want to fight, so they're going to move off into the northern mountains. And then Pippin tells them they got to go this way instead. Like, he fools them. And so they see the destruction that Isengard has wrought. Well, they already know that in the book. So this is just making the Ents appear dumber and easily misled. So I didn't like this scene. I thought they should have just stuck with the original. It would have been much better because the Ents were really pissed off and were marching to war. and they had a great song to go with it. So I would rather have but I guess it gives Pippin and Merry more purpose. They actually do think outside the box in the movie, as opposed to in the book where they're just busy drinking entrance and getting big and waiting around. All right, so now we get to the next scene that bothered me about the Two Towers movie. It's during the Battle of Helms Deep, which I thought was really cool, except for there were no dun landings there. It was just all Uruk-hai. That kind of bothered me. And then Theoden, they got Gimli blowing the horn, but Gimli's supposed to be in the Glittering Caves holding out with Almer and Gamling. And then just as the gate breaks, they make this charge, but the problem is they make the charge inside the actual citadel, not at the Hornburg itself. Like, there's just so many, and they could easily have overcome them. Then they just bowl them over like tin pins. What really happened was the Orcs and Uruk-hai and Dunlanders never took the Great Gate. They almost did a couple of times, but Aragorn and Éomer drove them back 3 times in the course of the night. And then in the dawn, King Theoden, not wanting to be trapped like a badger, decided to make a charge and a final with all that remained of the men inside the rock, the citadel. So he had one of his men blow the horn of Helm, and then just as the gates fell, they made their charge, and as before the Orcs could get in the citadel itself. So the Orcs never set foot within the citadel or rock of Helm's Deep, Agrenost. But you look at they're just lined up waiting to die, these guys. I know it's CGI. If you look, they're charging. He's got 2, 4, 6 guys plus Aragorn and Legolas up front. Gimli's still blowing the horn. Look at them all. It looks pretty cool, but that's not how it was. And then at the same time as they were making their charge down the causeway, the people in the Rohirrim in the Glittering Caves also burst out and started attacking all the enemy that was within the Glittering Caves of the Deeping Wall. They could have easily been overwhelmed. Then you got Gandalf coming here at sun. It's actually a low ridge that he appears on with the sun. Look how steep that hill is down to the Helm's Deep. That's pretty steep. And he's got Éomer with him, who's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be Erkenbrand. But they had to give Éomer more screen time, though he would have had lots of screen time in Helm's Deep itself. Then they come riding down. It seems like there's a lot of them. There's only 1,000. Horses, that's just ridiculous. The horses cannot do that, go down that kind of a slope. Look at them all. Then they get blinded by the light, wrapped up like a douche. Blinded by the light. So that was a really, really cool scene cinematically. Unrealistic. Makes them almost look like they're in a cave. So that kind of bothered me that they didn't go with a little more realism in this. Because Tolkien was all about making it real as possible. And remember, Helm's Deep was only facing an army of 10,000. There might have been 10,000 Orcs and Uruk-hai, and then maybe another 4,000 Dunlanders. They don't say the number of Dunlanders, it just says Gandalf has a problem with 10,000 Orcs. To Treebeard. But you gotta remember there's a thousand men at Helms Deep, plus Theoden brought 1,000 men, and then Erkenbrand had 1,000 men. So that's 3,000 against whatever was left. Because when you're attacking a fortified citadel, the losses are gonna be at least 4-1. Ralph Baggi his version was a little better when it came to that, and there were no elves. So one of the last things that bugged me about the Two Towers was when Faramir brings them to Osgiliath. I'm not sure how he accomplished that because Henethenen is far north in Forlithian, and he would have had to drive them through the forest to Carandros. I like that shot though of the tower getting destroyed. To Carandros, and take him by boat. He would have had to cross over by boat to Carandros, and then cross over again to the banks of the Anduin into Anorian, and then he would have had to go all the way south to Osgiliath. It makes Faramir look like he's weak when he's not. He's actually very noble, and that's what Tolkien was trying to say, that not the two brothers were so different. Both are desperate to save Gondor, one knows that he cannot control the ring. But Peter Jackson was trying to make the ring so evil that anyone can be corrupted by it. So he brings him here. So Frodo walks up, ready to sacrifice himself to give the ring up, because he's got weak-willed. And this scene is really cool looking. The whole thing is cool. If you never read the book, this is great. Great stuff. But anyway, those are the things that bother me most about the Two Towers. The Peter Jackson movie. I might be nitpicking on a few of them. Some of the changes he made were quite nice, but for the most part, he could have stayed with the book or added different elements. All you Lord of the Rings fans, let me know what you guys think of my choices. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What else did you not like? Leave comments in the comment section. Hit the like button, subscribe to the new channel. Until next time, I'm Roman Daisel. I am out of here.